Donahue. Mr. Prohaska.
Here.
Ms. Ryan.
Here.
Ms. Siegert.
Here.
Ms. Whitman.
Here.
I move that the Board of Education approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approve the agenda. All in favor can say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I move that the Board of Education approve the agreement with D.A. Davidson and Company to serve as placement agent on the Series 2016 bonds.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approve the agreement with D.A. Davidson and Company to serve as placement agent of the Series 2016 bonds. Is there any discussion?
Maybe if Kevin could give us the quick overview. I know it's been discussed a little bit, but
Right. If you recall at the September Support Services Committee meeting, Tim Oswald came and gave us a financial update, and he talked about us having to issue bonds for the senior project. We need some additional financing as that project had been moved up in scale from really 2 years, it'd be 26 months to, or from 38 months to 26 months. It was shortened. So the financing would come more quickly and we would not have enough cash without the bond issue. You also remember he talked about whether he was going to place it privately or put it out for public bid. And in your packet is a recommendation from his work suggesting that we go with the private placement. That's the reason we need to approve that agreement with that private placement entity.
and Kevin, all of those funds still come through the sales tax.
Right, right. All payments on those bonds will be paid through sales tax.
Great.
I have a question. As far as I understand where we need the money because of the time frame, is there a reason why we're having this bond in lieu of using some type of other reserve funding, et cetera?
I guess I don't follow your question, Jim.
Well,
We don't
if
have
we
enough
have reserve-
cash to continue.
We do not have the cash to continue with this.
Right. That's why we have to issue bonds in order to get the cash to make payments to the contractor.
In the sales tax.
In
We
the
want to
sales tax.
pay the entirety of
Okay.
this out of
Right.
sales
We
tax
want to
and
pay
not
for
use
all,
other funds.
not
This
use
would
other
This
funds.
would have used sales tax monies regardless.
Regardless.
Correct.
Okay.
Just accelerating the
Use of those.
use
Okay.
of the funds.
Thank you very much. I understand that now.
Has nothing to do with general fund or
Okay.
any other fund. This
Right.
is strictly sales tax fund.
Great, thanks.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
I move that the Board of Education approve the agreement with Allers and Cooney PC to serve as bond counsel on the Series 2016 bonds.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approve the agreement with Ehlers and Cooney, P.C., to serve as bond counsel on the Series 2016 bonds. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution directing the sale of approximately $10 million school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds, Series 2016.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Board of Education approve the resolution directing the sale of approximately $10 million school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds, Series 2016. Is there any discussion?
So Kevin, this is a routine movement on our part. It's part of the bigger picture, the bigger plan with the 1 cent sales tax to continue the funding for ongoing building projects.
Correct. If you remember, in September, Tim talked about our bonding capacity, and this is just one of those steps in that total bonding capacity available. We need the funds in order to make payments to the contractor as the project continues.
And quite honestly, it's good news because this means we're moving the project from a 3-year project to a 2-year project. So we're getting it done earlier, more kids will benefit from it, but in order to do that, we have to move a few dollars forward. But it's a good education move for
Moving the project along more quickly, less interference with the school year, less congestion in the parking lots, et cetera.
More quickly than what was originally
Originally planned.
planned.
right,
I mean,
right.
we're still on
Yeah.
a
It's 2
same
years.
times.
2 years instead of 3.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
All part of the plan.
All part of the plan.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Burton.
Aye.
Mr. Byteam.
Aye.
Mr. Prohaska.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Ms. Siegert.
Aye.
Ms. Whitman.
Aye. All right, thank you. All right, we are next on the agenda for strategic plan update.
Okay. Thank you. Just a real quick reminder for those maybe who are viewing at home. 5 years ago, or 4 years, a little over 4 years ago, when we rolled out the strategic plan, we wanted to develop a process that made sure that the strategic plan stayed a vital part of who we are and what we do. It didn't just collect dust on a shelf, but it had very regular conversations and, quite honestly, report outs to the board and the community as to where we were moving. So we landed on a process where we set priority initiatives each spring, and then I report out in October, February, and then June as to the accomplishments of those priority initiatives. So just quick background or history there. I also, because I know I'll forget to do this at the end after I've been talking for maybe a couple hours, maybe an hour, we'll forget to thank the people who really bring this to life, and that, of course, is the executive staff and the folks at this table, as well as our building principals, teachers, employees at all levels. And we are a significantly different district this year than we were last year. We've reduced through our budget about 13 positions just at the forum alone, as well as some other things. And so a lot of people are doing additional work or new work, and I just wanted to thank them for the work that they've put into that to date, because it's been fantastic. So I will hand out a copy of our priority initiatives, and there are copies for the media and others as well. And as you know, the icons that follow, a check mark would indicate completed, green significant progress, yellow steady progress, and red some progress. The first year we did this, we had a lot of check marks in October, and I think the board challenged us to maybe think a little larger. If we could check off things 3 months into the school year, then maybe those initiatives didn't stretch quite as far. So you will see in today's report out, we have very few. We don't have any check marks because we're looking at bigger picture items. So it would be reasonable to expect that most of our icons would be in the. Could you go back to the page, please? Green, steady, significant to steady progress areas as we endeavor to complete them this school year. So if you would move forward, Mike. As I had mentioned earlier, our strategic plan, which was set in November 4 years ago, so right at almost the 4-year mark, we outlined student achievement, student development, community engagement, effective resource management, and employee excellence. And then what are our goals, how are we going to do this, and how would we measure that? And we also knew we needed a year-by-year sort of way to again, be accountable to the board and to the community. Interestingly enough, through this process, we have had several districts around the state who have used our template and our process to report to their community. So we think we're on to the right track. So I'll jump in. As you know, this year we added some bullet points to the top, and these are of the more permanent basis. They're not going to be the priority initiatives that will follow, but this is how we are going to view our work as we move forward. So I won't need to go through all of those, but it has a lot to do with collaboration and empowering our employees, in particular our building level leadership in conjunction with their employees to continue to find ways to improve the district. The first goal, and you'll see that is a green icon, significant progress. School leaders will develop new school-based action plans that best suit the individual school needs, supported by district staff and aligned with district goals. This is, if I had to choose one priority initiative to focus on, this would be the one we would like to focus on the most, because it does change from sort of the top-down model of leadership to putting processes in place to give building leadership teams, site councils, teachers a voice into the direction of their specific building versus just following along with a path defined by the folks here at the forum. So we went through a process where buildings turned in their plans September 15th. We then took those plans and I'm meeting individually with each of the principals to discuss their plans, and then our teachers on special assignment, our curriculum folks, are meeting and figuring out ways that they can support each of those plans. Now, a major change for next year is already in the works in the timing. You'll notice that this spring we'll set our priority initiatives in May versus June. And that was so that we could get through the early phases of this process, because those building plans do reflect the priority initiatives set by the board, giving our principals and their leadership teams and their teachers an opportunity for some input before they leave for the year in June. So as I said, they were due September 15th this year, because this process was outlined at the end of June at our priority input session then. So we're moving everything forward a month so that buildings can get these plans in place, so that we'll have the summer months to put pieces together to be able to support the buildings as they move forward with those priority initiatives. Again, these school-based action plans follow along with the goals of the strategic plan, follow along with the goals of the priority initiatives. They won't address every single priority initiative in every plan, and there's also some room in those plans for them to do things in addition to the strategic plan, so giving them some autonomy and some opportunity to work with their staff to determine what's best for their students, again, following the same goals. We talk a lot about, one of the things we used at our opening was, a lot of roads to get you to Indianapolis, so we're allowing our buildings to get to that goal, to get to Indianapolis by the route that meets the needs of their students and their staff and their parents most effectively. So this is, of everything I'm going to talk about tonight, the largest change of all of those things. And to date, our principals and their teams are highly engaged in this. We are scrambling a little faster. It's kind of the duck scenario. Hopefully we look calm on top, and we're paddling pretty fast underneath the water to make sure we're in a position to be able to support these plans. Next year will be a little bit easier because we'll have the summer months to put some plans into place. Any questions in regards to that? Implement new and enhanced experience-based instructional strategies such as project-based learning. So a lot of that has gone on in pockets, different places around the district for years. Certainly at the high school level in some of our more hands-on classes, industrial tech, science classes, middle school with some of the exploratory classes, at the elementary, a variety of different ways. Certainly Prescott's charter reflects that. But we really wanted to make this a priority initiative where we study and bring to our principals and their leadership team a real emphasis, and I would say student engagement. We would tweak this goal to say student engagement, because it's really about student engagement, whether that's, you call it active learning, hands-on learning, project-based learning, student engagement, all of those things. How do we get kids into solving real-world problems, doing research, making decisions to enhance their education. So we've had a lot of informational meetings in regards to that. The principals are working with their teams. Really, this is the year that we're going to study this, and when we look at our building plans that I just referenced in the previous bullet next year, we will see some significant growth in this area and how all of our students will be engaged differently in their learning. Of course, every teacher and every building will embrace that slightly differently. The non-negotiable part is get students engaged in hands-on, real-world, problem-based, problem-solving scenarios.
So would this then supplement, or would this be like at Prescott as an example, for the better part, most of their curriculum is kind of centered around project-based learning, I believe?
A great deal of it is through their charter.
And so like at some of our schools then, are you suggesting or advocating that the entire curriculum be project-based, or just have a student have examples?
No, I think, sorry, let me cut you off.
Have examples or get some experience with project-based learning?
So when I think about a student's education from preschool through the graduation senior year, I would want them to experience a wide range of strategies that got them involved. And so certainly the in-depth class focuses on a specific project for the entire semester, the entire year. At the high school level, maybe at the elementary school, middle school level, they come in and out of that. So really, this is where we're trying not to tell the buildings exactly how that looks, but we're allowing teachers to make those decisions and buildings to make those decisions A lot of what you're going to hear me talk about today really is based on the fact that we now have Friday collaboration time to develop those types of lessons so that teachers can implement that. So I don't know that we're headed down a path where all day, every day, well, in fact, I know we're not headed down a path that all day, every day is that type of a learning scenario, but it's a continuum, and teachers and buildings will have some control over that continuum. And then on the other end of that, we'll have students who will have experienced a wide range of teaching strategies and styles. And that's good for their future. That's good for students moving on to college or university who are going to have a whole range of professors, everything from the traditional to things that are only problem solving based, or students who move into the world of work are going to have a wide range of work experience as bosses. So we really want kids to experience a wide range of teaching styles and strategies, and not be, not to dictate from the district level what all teaching should look like. It's what we talked about in the opening. There's the science and there's the art, and so we want to certainly give people a well-versed science of teaching, but also let them bring the art to teaching and what best meets the needs of their students and their teaching style. A teacher can be very student engaged focused using the Socratic method, where they really is just a conversation and it's question and answer based. I mean, there's a million ways to do that and still engage students in their learning. Implement a collaborative process that uses standards to guide teaching and learning district-wide to ensure targeted end-of-course outcomes. So all of these things are somewhat tied together. So you just heard me say we want to give teachers some flexibility in how they get to where they're going, buildings, flexibility in how to get to where they're going. But it is important at the end of that roadmap is that we're getting to similar places, so that a student at one of our high schools has the same learning in physics or chemistry or language arts as the other high school. They've met the same goals, they've learned the same skills that we've defined as being those essential skills. So we have collaborative processes in place. I'm sorry, I've kind of gone off script here, so I lost my place, but we have done an immense amount of training around collaboration for the last 6-7 years in this district. Now it's time for us to implement and kind of get out of the way as those processes. Collaborative inquiry, AIW, teacher task analysis, there's work at the new teacher center, the teacher leadership system. So now we've done the groundwork of building that capacity. Now we need to allow time for that collaborative process to take place. We really, I'm going to try not to say this 100 times, but we really bank on those Friday mornings to be able to do this, because it's about collaboration. It's also curriculum leaders working with groups of teachers to look at outcomes and what are the essential learnings that all of our students need to have in order to be successful at the next level, regardless of what that level is. So your learning targets, key experiences, activities. In some cases, do we have some related assignments so that there's some, but it's, again, teachers working together to develop that. All right. This is an interesting process for us now. So we're yellow with our under student achievement, refine the mix of standardized tests and informal assessments to maximize learning time while educating teachers, students, families, and the community about current and new testing systems, i.e. smarter, balanced, and their use. So we are in process of getting a lot of that learning ourselves. With our current assessment, we're asking our curriculum directors and some teams to look at those assessments and figure out how are those assessments used for decision making in the classroom for the enhancement of education of our students. And if they're not, then we're going to quit doing them. I mean, if they're not helping us teach better, helping us understand how Stan thinks, how Kobe thinks, how Tom thinks, and helping educate students, then we're going to find ways to quit, to stop some of that testing. Iowa Department of Education is beginning to offer training sessions to prepare a statewide implementation of Smarter Balanced. There is some, I guess, difference of opinion as to where we'll be with Smarter Balanced next year. The Department of Ed and the legislature last session would say that we will implement Smarter Balanced next year. Actually, the first training session for that is in early November. I'm not sure the exact date, but We'll have representation there, Nancy, David, and some others to learn about the Smarter Balance so that we can begin to train our staff. There's a training requirement of teachers on how the Smarter Balanced is implemented, but also talk to our students, talk to our parents, what is Smarter Balanced? And we believe there might be some strengths there. We're concerned about the cost. It is significantly more expensive than our current Iowa test that we give. I believe the price goes from about $8 per student to $28 per student. But we also think that it allows us to get rid of some testing. It's very similar to MAP testing in some ways, and so we think we can do one test, Smarter Balanced, that replaces multiple tests that we currently give and still have the immediate access to data and decision making that MAP testing gives us.
Stan, as part of the process, I mean, anytime you bring in a new testing system, there's lots of questions, and I know there's some controversy about the Smarter Balance and other related tests, but in terms of our community and getting them comfortable and understanding exactly what it is, you know, samples of the tests, are we going to have any kind of events where we can have the tests, or at least similitude of the test, available for people to look at?
So we'll find out a lot about that at that training session. And Nancy, do you know the date of that? The 7th. So on November 7th, we will, and maybe Nancy or David, if you want to jump in, we'll know some of that information.
Right now, online at the Smarter Balanced website.
I've
You can
seen
go
a
in and
few
you
of them.
can-
They're
you
much
can
more
try it.
intuitive, much more more critical thinking oriented, is my impression.
But part of the training is to have teachers actually go in and do those practice tests and see what it will be like for the students.
We'll share that with the board through ed programs for the full board, and then again with community members and students, because ultimately that's, you know, our target market. But certainly, I remember when we went to MAP testing, I believe some board members actually took the MAP test. I think George took it for sure. I'm not sure about others. So George, well,
We do have assurances those results won't be shared publicly.
I don't remember ever hearing a score from George. But so there is some controversy yet around this test as regards to it's not an Iowa produced test as some of the other options were, and so will that create some hold up at the state level? There are some concerns about how it is or isn't tied to the Iowa core, which again, that is a concern for some. So we are at this point assuming we're going to move forward with it because that's what we've been told by the state, but we are watching sort of the political process to see, you know, we should have implemented this year and then it got pushed back a year. So it is possible that it would get pushed back additional years based on the outcomes of a lot of things that will take place in Des Moines this winter. Any other questions in regards to that? Another thing we pay a lot of attention to these days is Chapter 62. That is the legislation that defines the automatic retention on third grade without some, if you're not proficient at reading and had some intensive interventions. So we are continuing to pay a lot of attention to that, not only as it's currently written, but as it changes, we'll pay attention to that. So district and school administrators and teacher leaders are working to focus this year to make sure that we understand that, you know, the foundational pieces that students will need to be proficient according to Chapter 62, and then what types of experiences we can offer students that they're not automatically retained. We currently have a summer school program that you're all well aware of, and we're looking at some other possibilities in our primary or even potentially kindergarten or pre-kindergarten to ensure that we give students those supports so that they can move on with their class from third to fourth grade, and more importantly, to be successful readers at that point. A lot of work about diagnostic information from both formal and informal reading assessments. So Heather and Tammy Deer, who's here, spend a great portion of their life these days working on that. I can't ask for two better people to focus on that. And then working with coaches and teachers to make sure that we understand, or they understand how best to teach the skills that are needed. Jim?
Yeah. What are the measurements that are used for this third grade reading progress? What actually is the measuring tool?
So that's,
Is it the Smarter Balance?
it's not Smarter Balanced
Okay.
currently.
Okay.
So Tammy, do you want to give us so it changes from grade level to grade level.
Okay.
Yeah, so currently, right now, the assessments that we use are FAST, is a screener in kindergarten, and DIBELS in 2 through 5.
Dibbles, okay.
So we are moving to that, will all be FAST next year.
Well, yes, we're moving, we're Dibbles fast, now we're moving all to fast. It's a
Acronym for?
Well, FAST is the screener, but FAST itself is the company.
Okay.
Right, out of the University of Minnesota.
Yeah, it's FAST, it doesn't,
The state of Iowa chose that.
right. So it's a state of Iowa choice out of the University of Minnesota, but what actually FAST stands for, I'm not sure it stands for. Yeah.
Doesn't stand for formative
Doesn't stand, doesn't,
Formative assessment.
System
For students, teachers.
Formative assessment system for teachers.
so,
So the state of Iowa here is kind of helping out our friendly neighbors to the north with the FAST and the helping out the Gophers.
yeah. And there are some technical glitches with that too, but we do see it being an advantage for our kids to get them on the right
Sure.
track and identifying where they're at. Coming into kindergarten, all of our kindergartners have already tested, so we know where they're starting. And then we'll do multiple testing throughout the year so we can really identify and jump on those kiddos who are struggling as early in the school year as we can. And that acronyms and everything else aside, that's important for us to be able to know where people are at and how do we move them, what areas they're struggling in, so that we can help shore that up and get them up to grade level. Okay, now moving to student development, LEAP, determine and secure various sources of support to sustain middle school LEAP programming for this school year and then hopefully beyond. We've been successful in doing that. Amy, that now falls under, in Amy's world, as a co-curricular, extracurricular activity. We have had a significant level of funding through the Foundation for Dubuque Public Schools. So if you know folks on that board, please thank them for helping raise a significant amount of money for that. We have also received some funding, about $10,000 worth from Leisure Services, because they recognize that as an after-school programming which they could play a role. And then also we utilize some at-risk funding, because we do know that especially for middle school kids, the hours from 3 to 5 o'clock are the time they're the most at risk. The chance, if they're not in a positive environment, for them to make choices that maybe aren't that aren't in their best interest or the best interest of the community. So to give you an example what that looks like, kids have, it's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday program this year. Those were the 3 days that had the highest participation in the past. And there are 3 options at each school on those days. So we were able to do this at Roosevelt as well as Washington and Jefferson. So there are 3 programmatic opportunities, and then there's also study homework help available as well. So 3 programs plus homework help that actually kicks off here shortly. We will report out those numbers through Activities Council, through our ed programs. And then this year is a little bit of an incentive. There are some bigger off-site things, zip lining, those types of things. So the students have to go to at least 15 on-site programs to then qualify for the off-site programming. So it is kind of the carrot at the end of the stick to get kids to participate in a variety of those programs, and not just sort of the bigger, flashier ones that get you off-site. And again, we will continue to look for ways to make this sustainable as we move forward. Analyze and adapt dropout prevention and graduation plans to improve graduation rate within all demographics and student groups. We have a dropout prevention committee that is meeting regularly. Chris Oberhofer at the ALC and David Olson, surely others are highly involved in those meetings. We will bring some of their findings or thoughts or recommendations, again, up through the Ed Program Subcommittee. Secondary administrators, student needs facilitators, IJAG, re-engagement staff did a day on September 30th where leadership in the district came in and sort of did the science fair model, went table to table to learn about all the different programs so that they could see how it all meshes together as we move forward. And we'll develop a list of recommendations or thoughts, again, to bring to the board in December as we move forward with dropout. Interestingly enough, I was in Des Moines on Thursday with the UEN superintendents, and lot of dropout conversation and at-risk conversation focusing on now the kindergarten, first grade, preschool areas about the research is not only at third grade, but what does it take to get kids ready for third grade and what are we doing in the preschool? So we've talked for a long time as the global state nationally about dropout being sort of a high school issue. And now then we kind of moved to middle school. Now really we're all the way to the elementary and looking at that. That's a system-wide issue. If we can get to kids even before they get to kindergarten and make sure they get to high-quality preschool, which of course we have free 4-year-old preschool and have for a number of years, and kind of move. Success breeds success, and hope is one of the most important indicators that we have for student success. So students can only feel hopeful if they have the skills they need to be successful in that classroom, and that starts from the very beginning and not, right at the very end of their academic or their K-12 academic career.
What is our graduation? 90, what?
So our graduation rate is 5 years ago, I believe, we were about 88%. The last couple of years, we've sort of been back and forth between the 90 and 91%. It's kind of like the unemployment rate. What is maximum graduation? We certainly would say 100%. Because GEDs don't count, just strictly graduation, and that 90-91% is the 4-year graduation rate, which is what the state focuses on. We know that we'll probably never get to 100%. Interestingly enough, our 5-year graduation rate is 92.6, I believe. So it does go up, and in my mind, that's the bigger number anyway. Ultimately, do we care if it took the student 4 years or 5 years to graduate? If they get to that goal, to me, an extra year is an extra year. That's fine, as long as they're willing to help fund that year, right, Kevin? So our graduation rate technically is between 90 and 91%. I would say it's 92.6% because that's how many get there eventually. And again, 100% would be our goal. There's probably just like they say unemployment, 3% unemployment is probably full employment. There's probably a similar correlation somewhere with graduation rate. Here's one that is half a check mark or a dark green or however you want to call it, but effectively communicate the impact of the physical plant and equipment levy, which we did, had an 80% voter approval rate, which has been pointed out by the board as being historically high. So we're very, very excited about that. Now the other half of that work remains, which is the extension of the 1-cent sales tax on district operations. So again, we will be advocating for that legislatively. Kevin and I were in Des Moines on Thursday. The UEN superintendents and I suspect the UEN school boards, when they meet here in mid-November, will again identify this as a priority. We will continue to update our literature, our timelines. I think it's really important to point out that we as a district have lived well within those means. We have made huge improvements in this district. I don't need to list everything, but Prescott and Carver and updates in many schools as well as at Hempstead, now starting at Senior. And again, all of that without a general obligation bond. It didn't impact property tax in any way. So we do have a very significant process and a good plan moving us 10 years forward. And so we've lived well within those means while also impacting our students in a very positive way. Not every school district has had that same philosophy, which I think may make it harder to get the extension, but I guess time will tell. All right. Okay. Sorry. Focus collaboration with the juvenile court system law enforcement to lower truancy rates and lessen the referrals of children under 18. This one's a little bit in jeopardy. Funding for our current positions have been cut. We had a resignation. One of our two truancy officers who's been with us for quite a while has chosen, I believe, to stay home with kids, and then the juvenile court chose not to fund that replacement, and we believe may ultimately cut our second position in favor of what they would call juvenile court school coach, which again is something that we would be supportive of depending upon a variety of, how that job description is written. We believe that position wouldn't just support DCSD, but the whole county, which we kind of are interested in how that would work. And so it's ongoing. We're kind of negotiating that contract, Shirley is, as we speak with the First Judicial area to bring these positions, if they are going to cut the liaison positions to get the coaching positions. But we don't hold all of the pieces to this. We will certainly do the best that we can to advocate for the need for these positions. And Shirley, is that about the funding is somewhat like SROs. I mean, it's a shared funded position. We pay part, they pay part. If they choose to walk away, it would be hard for us to fully fund those positions. Thank you. Implement and monitor focused initiatives around school attendance, school readiness, and summer academy as partner in the collaborative impact model in the community-wide third grade reading campaign. So had a very successful summer school this past summer, but looking at ways that we can continue or enhance that. We are currently in the process of writing a 21st century grant, the same grant that paid for LEAP in the past, which we wrote last year for LEAP again this year, and we're unsuccessful because the reading of those grants, which Shirley was involved in again, indicated that the folks making those decisions had a preference toward summer school type of activities. So we are writing our grant currently, and May Henshin is leading that rewrite of the grant to focus on summer school so that we can enhance and bring even more to our summer school. And maybe we can take some of the dollars that the foundation was putting towards summer school and ask them, if we get this grant, to focus those dollars somewhere else to, again, for the betterment of kids. Some other things that have happened, TJ Potts is the new principal at Lincoln. He had a couple of paraprofessional, gen ed paraprofessional positions open. He approached me and Nancy and asked if he could instead hire a parent engagement coach versus the paraprofessional. It was budget neutral, so we're, again, letting a building have some autonomy, make some decisions, and we're monitoring the success of that. So instead of working specifically directly with kids, and it's not a special ed paraprofessional, it's gen ed, they're going to combine that position into one, and hire somebody, and they have a person on ground who's a retired police officer and has a lot of experience working with families in a very positive way. So making homeschool connections and helping figure out ways that we get kids who aren't often at school to school. So it's kind of a pilot project. We're excited about where that's at right now. Should that ultimately be a positive thing, then we'll look at adding similar positions at some of our other schools, probably starting with our title schools, but looking at other schools as well. So again, that's an example of that first bullet that I mentioned about giving buildings some autonomy, and so when approached, and of course the budget neutrality of it's going to be somewhat important to us. We can't spend dollars that we don't have.
Will we get a report on the summer school participants and how they retained from, now that we're into the school year? Will we be able to get to see that?
Absolutely.
How it benefited them, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
It did?
Yep, and so there's always the immediate summer school's over, or just as they're ending, how did they score? But is that still having an impact in January and February? Is there a retention piece? Does it put them on a more permanent trajectory for success? We'll absolutely share that data. Again, through ed programs policy, and then up to the full board should there be interest.
Stan, I see this is about the fourth or fifth objective in here that focuses on kids with difficulties and lower end kids. I don't see anything in the plan that's specifically targeting kids in the middle. I don't see anything in the plan that's targeting kids on the high end.
So I would say, Tom, that goes back to the second bullet point. I think that targets all kids, but specifically that's the student engagement project based. You're right, there's not a specific gifted and talented one, but I think that will lead us to opportunities for those kids that go above and beyond what maybe they get in a traditional classroom.
So we hope that there's a trickle-down effect from bullet point number 2 there, while we have a half a dozen objectives clearly going at kids on the lower end. And I'm fine with that. I'm glad kids on the lower end are getting attention that they need. How about kids in the middle getting attention they need? How about kids on the high end getting attention that they need?
I agree with you. I mean, there are ways in here, and again, I would point to that one, but not very specifically. So as we develop our other priority initiatives for next year, we'll take a note of that and keep in mind that the board would like to see some targeted, and not everything that we're doing in the district, of course, is represented in
Right.
this plan. So there are gifted and talented efforts. There are things going on, but you're right. It would be good to have a specific bullet to say, here's how we're going to serve kids with additional needs.
The thing that always grinded me as a regular ed teacher was the assumption that the kid in the middle, the quiet kid who she or he clips along with C's and B's, they're always just going to kind of be there and take care of themselves. And I always resented that as a regular student teacher 90% of the time. There was plenty of energy and dynamics around the class trip to the Shakespeare play for the gifted, talented kids. Plenty of attention going to kids who had specific needs, and I agree with that. But I mean, at some point, if my kid is just that casual, regular, easygoing kid, clips along with a couple D's every now and then, mostly C's, some B's, where do we give that kid the shot in the arm? And in the meantime, we take the attention of those teachers, and by default, with the whole system, I feel like we dilute them further by asking them to do more for kids at the high end, kids at the lower end. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. We don't have an unlimited checkbook, but it's something that always kind of bugs me, and I guess I really wish someday that we had something in here that said, you know what, that regular kid in the middle is going to get some attention. We're going to do something neat for the kid in the middle.
I think that's a great point. As not only a teacher of a kid in the middle, but as a former student of in the middle, I agree with that sentiment. So here's your opportunity. So the one area that we're red, and intentionally red, because
Moving on.
So throw it back to you now. It's
Well
your
done,
job.
Stan.
the work of the school board this winter will be to look at our strategic plan and tweak it or throw it out and start over or change it in any way that we kind of collaboratively develop. And this is our opportunity, or one of our opportunities, to look at some of those bullets, especially under student achievement, but in other areas too, to say what's in it for the kid in the middle. So I do think that it is good to speak that, and as we not only will develop new priority initiatives for next year, but we'll also be hard at work at looking at the strategic plan, which does sunset by design about a year from now, next November. So we will have some conversations in January, February. We'll begin a process to look at our strategic plan. And again, it may be a large-scale redo. It may be tweaking what we already have, and it might just be adding some things to it. But this is a real opportunity to not lose that thought, but to make sure that in our strategic plan, we drive a lot of opportunities and direction to look at, you know, that whole continuum of students and really focus some of that effort on the students that are in the middle. So, okay, monitor financial indicators following the 16-17 budget reductions to ensure continued adequate financial resources. So as you know, if you want to go to the next slide for me, we've seen this slide a lot. We know that we have went through a period here where we had to make significant reductions in 2008, 2009, maybe a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction, maybe cut too deeply to the point where we were able to save $15 million in a 3-year time frame. We know that 6 of the last 7 years, our supplemental state aid has been on the low side. In this past year, 1.25%. So we have set a goal of getting on this orange trajectory and staying there. And again, part of that depends on student enrollment and a variety of things, but it basically represents a healthy, the state should say we're in the gold line, or in that gold band, and so we want to follow this trajectory with our budget. So last year, so the year that ended at the end of June, our anticipation was to have drawn down from 11.8 $1 million to $8.7 million. And so we made reductions in our budget for this year that gave us an opportunity to start to flatten this out. Well, we never know how 1 year ends until the following October, and I know that seems crazy, but that's the way school finance works, because everything has to get coded and recoded and make sure it's in the right area. So our special ed deficit increased in some areas. We knew how much money we spent, but how much of that was coded to special ed versus general ed, and the impact of that was the next slide. So that's where we actually ended the year. So we are right on where we want to be. You'll see that we started to see this line flatten out. You know that we also made additional reductions for this year, as I mentioned earlier, most of those reductions here at the forum level, but other reductions as well. So we know that was somewhere in the $2.5 million range. That doesn't mean next year that this blue line is going to jump up $2.5 million, because we also got 1.25% supplemental state aid, and our expenses went up beyond that. So what I'm trying to say is that we ended last year, because of our budget reduction efforts, in a very good place. And I believe this year, even though our expenses went up higher than would have gone up higher than our supplemental state aid, because we made reductions, I believe we're going to start to merge along this line. We're really going to start to see this flatten out just as we had intended. So I think that is a very strong talking point for the board and for Kevin's team and for everybody who has input into that we've ended sort of this downward slope. We did make one more round of cuts that will be reflected next year. Of course, the new money wasn't as high to completely offset that, but I believe we're going to be right in this area for next year. Now our focus has to be on our special ed deficit. Our special ed deficit, as you know, is not subject to our spending cap, and so we can spend the dollars we need to in the area of special ed, but it is also a local tax situation. So you make up that deficit through your levy rate, which again, as we know, right now is reasonable in Dubuque by comparison, but still an area that we need to focus on is our special ed deficit. But as far as the general fund goes, we're pretty pleased to see that number.
I just heard a report today on the news talking about the cash that school districts are sitting on.
Yeah.
So therefore now they're going to be looking at that as, because they are, quote, sitting on so much cash,
It is.
but yet we can't spend it.
It
And
is.
so they're going to look at,
It is.
it's crazy.
It's statistics 101. They'll say what you want them to say. And so if you look at this number around the state, it's a huge number because every
Right.
school district has some reserve. We have to have some reserve in the same reason anybody needs to have a rainy day
Right,
fund.
but they're
And-
making their decision
Right.
based on a
So
dollar
if-
amount of
So
a,
depends
of
on which
lump
argument
sum.
you want to make.
I
If you want
know.
to make the argument
It's ridiculous.
of accountability and making good decisions, you could say we're right where we should be. If you want to make the argument to say schools don't need more money, you push the button and you sum total all of the dollars that are in unspent balances and say, look at all the money they have and not spending.
It wasn't that much when you divide it over 300 school
It's
districts.
174 million.
Yeah.
It's like $1 million less. It's like 600,000 per school
I know.
district. It's not.
I know.
There's two stories out there right now. One is the overall unspent balance, which is a higher number. The other story is categorical funding. So there are categorical funds that we simply can't spend because when we get dollars, you can spend them in this way. And I'll give you an example of that. We received money 6-8 years ago called market factor pay. And we used those dollars, if you remember, to give a small enhancement to $1,200 or something for teachers at Prescott and Audubon to try and, I think, or was it maybe Fulton? Prescott and Fulton, to try and create more longevity there. Well, the $35,000 isn't enough to continue that, but there's no other way we really can spend those dollars. So those dollars kind of sit there and spin in perpetuity. So there are some small categorical funds that way that you can't spend based on the way that the rules are written. There are other categorical funds around professional development, which we have some significant dollars left in our professional development. Again, that's the only place it can be spent. And so that's why you'll hear me often talk about local control being imperative, because or else we sometimes end up with a budget situation and then we've got categorical funds that can only be spent in one way that sit on the sidelines. And so again, every time we get categorical funds where somebody else decides how we can spend those monies, then the local control, that votes on the board, who hires the superintendent, all that goes out the window because you're only allowed to spend it in this way. And so that's a different number that they're talking about. Our contribution to that is about $1 million. We have about $1 million, some of which we can spend, but we can't go crazy spending that money because teachers need to be in classrooms, not pulled out for doing PD all the time, that sort of thing. So
Well, it's just sad they report on it in a way that makes it look like the school districts are not
sitting
doing
on
it,
Well,
and sitting on it, and
Right.
it's incorrect information without the whole story put out there.
Well, and Kevin,
welcome
this-
to the
It's
media.
intentional.
and there are some districts who do that. Kevin, this line represents what?
That's our goal.
Which
of
is-
the 12 months, 1 month worth of expenditures.
1 month, so our goal, this line represents 1 month worth of expenses, okay? So 1/12 of our budget. There are districts in the state, some of them large, who are sitting at about 50%
Oh, my.
of their spending authority in carryover. And in my mind, that's where we were headed here, and those dollars really should be spent on kids that we have today, within reason. We should follow this line. 1 month's expense sounds very, that's a reasonable place to be. But when you get to the point where you're just saving to save, that's not what those dollars are intended for. And there are some districts who are in that place. And we've been in that place, which is why we're trying to flatten that out right along that line. So that number is readily available. And again, somebody could say, we add our 10 million to it, it makes it look like it's this huge sum of money, and it's just us being fiscally responsible.
Hey, Stan, I know the October, some date in October is a deadline for getting the district count or whatever. Do you have an idea what it looks like?
So it changes, once the count is out there, and because they do it by student, by number, I won't go through the whole story, but right now I think we're down 31 students, Kevin, approximately 31 students, which for us is a very, 10,600 students, to be up or down 30, 40 students year over year, 5-year average, we're pretty flat.
Stan, I have a question. You talked about funds being restricted to certain categories. If there are funds unused in those certain categories, is there a time frame that if they're not going to get used for their intended purpose, that they can go to another category, or?
Not in most
did-
cases, in fact, I
That
don't
would
know
be
of any
rational.
case.
That would-
I can't think of a
Don't
case
go
in which
thinking.
that's.
Well, or do they always?
You may see a proposal through the UEN that allows for that, where.
I mean, if they sit for so long dormant, why not use them somewhere else?
They don't sit too long dormant.
Well, that's what I
Not too
mean,
long,
do
but
they?
every
Maybe
once
they
in a while you
don't.
get stuck, like that 35,000 I said in the market factor pay.
Yeah.
That could sit there for and it's 35,000, which isn't, but it sooner or later
It's
those
a
dollars ought to
salary
be
for,
spent on something, because it will literally sit in that sort of little crevice of the glacier forever.
but right now, there's not a way that those funds can be opened
No.
up and used somewhere else.
No, not without some change in legislative change.
One thing I'd like to add to what Stan said is, we have that 1 month of expenditures we like to maintain. If districts would probably feel more comfortable going below that, if we knew our funding appropriately timed, so that we could budget appropriately. If we
Right.
had that in advance, you
Right.
could negotiate appropriately instead of receiving it after the fact.
So Kevin, what you're saying
districts-
is if they just follow the law to give us the budget the year and a half
18
earlier than
months.
they were, when they're supposed to give it to us, we could be in a better position to kind of,
Plan accordingly,
Yeah.
yes. You wouldn't have to hold some of that back trying to make
Yeah.
adjustments for what you're receiving after the fact.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, unless there are other questions. Okay, prepare for anytime, anywhere digital learning environment in the 17-18 school year that coincides with updated course objectives and delivery at the 9th grade level. So what that says, in sort of a fancy way, is that we look at a one-to-one process for our freshmen for next year as sort of a first step in going where we need to be. Interestingly enough, Colby's and his team looked at our testing requirements for Smarter Balance and some other things, and where we're going with labs. And we will actually have fewer computers in our high schools if we gave not today, but down the road, if we gave every student a computer.
Really?
because of the volume we need in the labs to do some of the things that we need to do. So that's why we're looking at for 9th grade. So working on model and master courses, online learning environment, Canvas learning management system, scheduled to be ready for delivery beginning in the fall of 17. Courses include world language, science, math, English language, arts, and social studies. And so I looked at Colby earlier today and said, "Do you really want me to say this out loud?" And he said, "Yep." So we are going to be prepared to do a one-to-one environment for our freshmen for next year. And then we will make decisions based on the success
In all
of that.
fairness, there were lots of districts many years ago, I mean, in the last 10 years, who rushed to do that. They didn't have the programming, they didn't have the infrastructure. They got the headlines, but they failed.
If it didn't
And
impact,
so what I'm pleased is that we've taken our time to evaluate our needs and at the same time looking at what are the trends, and we're trying to make them meet.
Yep.
And I think that's what is more responsible.
Absolutely. And just to add on to that a little bit, I think we're easing ourselves into that process. We're not doing a wholesale approach where we're taking all 9 through 12, because we'll be able to to respond and evaluate and act accordingly year after year. So as we continue to onboard year after year, we'll be able to make adjustments and reevaluate where we're at. So I think this is a very prudent course of action that the district is taking. And to your point, Mr. Byteen, I think you're exactly right. There was a lot of districts that are out on the forefront that were, quite frankly, probably putting technology in for technology's sake. And I think we're taking the more reserved action. And I think what's really nice about this is you're finally seeing, at least in Dubuque's case, a convergence of curriculum and technology merging, where I think a lot of times they were running in parallel tracks, and we're finally converging the two together.
So just curiously, as far as the mechanics of that, just briefly, what would that entail? Like each student having their own device?
As far as each student having their own device, that's one of the things that we're still working out, the logistical issues of what that would look like, as far as you know, the onboarding, delivery of the equipment, how that would be timed. But in essence, it would be most likely a laptop. We found out that tablets weren't really working the whole spectrum of what needs to be used in the educational environment during the day. And so what we decided is that we'll probably be looking at a tablet, development of policies, procedures that will have to be aligned up with the curriculum. This is probably one of the first times, and Mr. Olson will probably be able to elaborate a little bit on this too, that technology is now playing a little bit of catch up to the curriculum side. It used to always be, we're ready, the technology side's ready. You tell us to pull the trigger, we're ready to go.
Okay.
And now I think they finally came together with the master courses, building all those out for the 9th grade level. That train's ready to leave the station, now we need to get on board. And I think this is great, because like I said, it's now seeing a convergence of the two together.
and we're not leaving, just starting with freshmen and forgetting about everybody else. We do have significant number of laptops, and adding to that, available for checkout in the library already. We started that last year, we've increased that this year. So other students already today, if you need technology, you can stop in the library and check that out and take it home with you. And that's, as I've visited buildings, and those are in high demand. So that's been a very successful thing for us.
Is the intention in those 9th graders, they have to turn that back in after they complete 9th grade, or will they get to have that device through their high school years?
We're expecting a device to last 4 years.
So they get to keep that, so then you won't have the need so much for those other grade levels that
Right.
we all have it.
Actually, some of those will find themselves in that cycle. And I would assume we're collecting those in the summer. And,
Yes.
so it's
But
not.
the goal would be is to reissue those back
Oh,
out.
you'll
If I'm a-
collect them in the summer, okay.
Yes, and then when
Unless
I'm
we're
a
doing
10th
summer
grader,
school.
then I would get reissued the same device.
Because I know at
Because
the college level, like at Loris, they'll get it, they'll keep that device, and they only turn it in if it needs repairs.
Correct.
Otherwise, they,
Correct.
okay.
But we'll end up pulling them back over the summer for summer maintenance, refreshing, cleaning the devices, getting them ready to go for the following school year. But they will be reissued the same device. That's some of the things that districts have done is where they will have them tagged through our asset management program called Destiny. And then when I come back in as the incoming 10th grader, I will get that same device reissued back to me. We'll also hopefully anticipate seeing damage go down, because now it's a direct correlation of that student with that device. Where right now, they have a multitude of devices that they can choose from. I think it also gives that student more ownership,
Oh, yeah.
because that is now their device. that is their conduit for learning in the
Will there
environment.
be an opt-out? Like if they insist on using their own device that they purchased?
There will. The only issue is then you have to look at that instructional burden that could be placed on that individual faculty member, because what will happen is that if they use their own device, as long as it can do Canvas and some of those other materials, that's fine. But, well, we also looked at BYOD, bring your own device. And every district is a BYOD, quite frankly. They're all bringing these things in. But the problem is you can't do everything you need on a device
So
like this.
we'll encourage them to use our devices?
Correct.
Okay.
Or
Especially
one
for
with,
testing.
or one with similar
Or similar
specs.
equivalent specs.
If they really want to go out and buy their own, and we'll say, look, these are the specs that the teachers are operating off of. If you want to purchase your own, that's fine. But, again, it has to, it'll be a huge stumbling block if all of a sudden they can't run Canvas or they can't do some of the
Right.
things that they need
There's
to
no
do.
control there.
And again, I would point out that this is still yellow, and while we think we're headed the right direction, it's yellow, it's not green, it's not a check mark. So we'll continue to keep the board updated as we move forward, and certainly timing and those types of things can change. But as of today, we're comfortable that there's some progress being made in this area. Help students bridge the homework gap by piloting wireless internet access on select district bus routes. So the vendor was at the bus garage today and will be all week as we begin this process of actually mounting, if that's the right word, the hot spots and whatever else is needed to make this a reality. Then there's some work that needs to happen to sync it up with our system, but it is very much green. It is moving forward, and we certainly would expect that in the relatively near future for our winter sports seasons and for our winter bus routes, kids on long routes or going to activities. And I believe you matched them up with the same buses that are air conditioned, because those tend to be the ones that go the furthest away for events, and so we want kids to have access.
That's correct.
spring
Superintendent
and fall.
Ryan Gaines, we selected 7 school buses. 5 of them are activity route buses, and the other 2 buses are the longest route on the south end of the district and the longest route on the north end of the district. One of the issues that we're running into is working through all the installation of the equipment, and then it'll have to be turned over to us to start extending our wireless signal onto that bus. So we might see something like DCSD on the go or to go or something, which will signify this is a wireless access, but they will have the same capability and the same filtering that's in place on campus in these instructional mobile classrooms that we're hoping to
It's not
capitalize
as simple as putting somebody might sit out there and think, well, I can turn my phone into a hotspot anytime I want, so why is it taking the school districts long? Well, it's because we have a lot of other requirements to filter content, and there's a lot of other things that need to be in place before we can
Kobe,
make
how
wireless
close can I
access.
get to the bus to pick up the wireless?
Well, if you're going, this might be a math problem. If you're going 65, no, just kidding. But to Mr. Martin's point about some of the students that we're serving, sort of those middle of the roads or middle students there, that would, the average students, if that's where you're going, I'm trying to figure out what the best way to phrase
Kids that
that
want to
is.
do their homework.
Exactly. Kids that want to do their homework, they will have that opportunity now. And some of those students that don't have that luxury, that affordability to do that at home, or they're at an event and they're coming back home at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, they'll have that capability on the school bus now to be able to tap into wireless internet access, unlimited bandwidth through the provider that will be getting that, as long as we can't allow them to watch movies though over it. So hopefully they're doing their homework, and we'll be able to monitor all that as well too. So once again, it'll be the same exact environment that we have. I think it's an exciting opportunity, quite frankly, for our schools.
Yeah, I think depending upon the cost effectiveness of the usage, we'll look at expanding that significantly. We will certainly not stop with that number. Get to the point where they'll all be.
At the federal level, to maybe make some dollars to subsidize that cost if the FCC would change the E-rate program. So we'll hopefully we'll see that happen too.
Okay. Develop a system to make data across the district more efficiently collected, more easily accessible, and more usable by staff for instructional decision-making, more readily available for various stakeholders. Many of you are very familiar with PowerSchool, and so one of the things that Colby and a variety of principals, and we'll pull in other stakeholders, is looking at is, because, and PowerSchool has been very good for us, but there are other systems out there that really have even more capability to look at data, make it available not only for our staff but for parents as well. So that's kind of where we're at with that right now, is looking at the student information system and then how that will facilitate and look at some of the other data gathering like Tableau. I've got a couple other terms here that Colby gave me, but to really make that a more robust system to collect that data, do stuff with that, you use that, make that data user friendly for not only the teacher but also the parent and the student. All right, employee excellence. Develop a staff recognition system that highlights outstanding work happening across the district. So we're really trying to look at that in multiple ways. We're looking at how is that done currently, you know, Teacher of the Year, highlights on our district updates and those videos. And then we're also looking at externally. So we're looking at what our current state. We're also looking at external and internal opportunities. And one of the things that we've talked about is externally, the district maybe isn't as focused on some of those opportunities that are available in the community as it might be. Things like the Rising Star or the different things that you see within the community, we haven't really participated in. Well, you know, there are certainly employees that we have that we should promote for some of those types of recognitions within the community. So we don't want to look just internally, but we want to do it externally to help give those recognitions to our employees. Also be more in tune with some of the things that are available in the education realm, like Counselor of the Year, or that sort of thing. I don't even know if I'm allowed to announce that yet or not, but the Iowa Council, I am? Okay. And it was what's the right word? Embargoed for a while, but so the school counselor of the year this year is Paula Baumann, who's a guidance counselor at Jefferson Middle School. So it's making sure we're in tune, and that was really a staff-driven recognition. The staff at Jefferson got together and said, we really need to nominate her for this award. They did all the legwork and asked for some input on some videos and stuff, but really, so making sure that we're in tune to what are those types of opportunities that exist externally to help get our folks recognized.
Stan, is this where you're announcing your willingness to represent the district at Dancing with the Stars next year?
Absolutely not.
Is this where they get to drive your pickup for a week or something like that? Or?
I would give that up before I would do Dancing with the Stars. There are very few things that my wife will not allow me to do in public. Dancing is the top of that list, closely followed by singing, because she's seen both and isn't very supportive in those areas. So.
This kind of thing will promote the profession of teachers and counselors.
Yes, absolutely.
Also.
Absolutely. And then we're also trying to figure out ways that we can internally do it, making sure that we are in tune with things from board salutes as well. We're trying to come up with a new video segment available on our website. Also looking for authentic opportunities to recognize real work, and Tammy, referencing her a lot today, but really has been instrumental in this, and that we've got a writing process that we're trying to figure out as a district, and lo and behold, we've got a teacher at an elementary school who's developed this whole process that's great. And so Tammy approached this teacher and said, we'd like to replicate this district-wide, and that, from what, I'd let Tammy talk, but the teacher was emotional with, like, really, you think it's that good? So it's not only just the recognition, but it's the recognition of the expertise,
right,
and taking things that are happening in our district or on our Friday PD sessions or and putting those experts into positions to share their knowledge and what they've developed with a larger audience, because there's probably nothing that's more of a pat on the back than recognizing authentic work that really now we're going to replicate because it's that good. So try to make sure we're in tune to those ideas. We're working with principals at our district leadership meetings about what systems they have internally to recognize their staff, and then how they're going to funnel that to us. It would be nice to make sure whenever there is those types of recognition, that then it's recognized at other levels as well, the board, the superintendent, that sort of thing.
Teachers, like everybody else, like all human beings, like a little pat on the back once in a while also. I think also the district handled very well, the presidential award teacher, Mrs. Johnson, that we had at Sageville this past year. That was quite What an honor for our district.
Absolutely. We have fantastic employees. We have
Yep.
unbelievable folks
Yep.
here, so we just need to make
Yep.
sure we know that
Yep.
they know that we know that they're doing a great job. Create a stronger team atmosphere by working with schools to strengthen and deepen the collaborative process that ensures teachers are working in teams, regularly review lessons, and share best practices. There was a little bit of a redundancy with that one. Trying to figure out where, with one of our earlier goals, we talked about all of the work we've done with collaboration. And again, I would really stress the importance of our Friday mornings. We talk about professional development, professional learning, but if you're in our schools, what you really see is collaboration time, where they are talking about a specific class, a specific lesson, and sometimes a specific student, particularly, and how are we going to make an impact this student. So, whether they're on the spectrum, that we can hone into what their skills are, what their interests are. So, really that PD on Fridays, we need to think about changing that term, and I think we will in our next rendition of the calendar. That really is the professional collaboration time. I mean, there's learning that goes on, but it's a 20-minute thing, and then teachers go into their work groups and figure out how they're going to implement what it is that we're talking about. So it really has turned into high-quality professional collaboration amongst our staff.
I went to Senior today to look at the renovation, see how the progress was coming along, and I happened to go into school, and I ran into a few of my former science teacher colleagues. So I said, hey, give me an honest assessment of these Friday mornings. And the word out was,
Tell you.
they did. They would tell me. I know they would. They told me very productive. So I was very glad to hear that. And I've been observing a student teacher at Hempstead, and I also asked some of the teachers there, same answer, very productive. So I'm really glad that they have the time to do this stuff, and it's paying off in the long run. Our students are going to benefit.
Absolutely, and I think the key to that has been we have been steadfast about the fact that is building-based, building-directed time. Mm-hmm. Buildings make choices about how to utilize that time, as long as it, again, is taking them to Indianapolis, right? And they might choose different ways to get there, but they're doing it in a very productive, collaborative way that I think really helps teachers feel like, it's not come into a big room and we'll talk at you for, an hour. It's let's get to work and grow the profession. And the last thing is provide employees ongoing information on community opportunities to improve health and wellness. A couple of things going on there. Again, that's yellow. Currently emailed health and wellness information, so we are more in tune, really, Mike, as well as Rhonda and others, about how do we share health and wellness information that we get or that we find with the district, whether there's opportunities to participate in something through the Mercy system. There's been a variety of things where we've been able to share that information. It's also, we're in the process of developing a web page or a link to our website where a teacher or any staff member can access, okay, what are the opportunities available to me from health and wellness. And it might be as simple as, we have places that give us a rate reduction for a physical fitness facility, or information about flu shots when we do flu shots for our staff. I did get a call from a parent worried we were giving flu shots to students. We don't do that, so we just do that for staff. But I think they heard flu shot and thought maybe we were not getting students. We've also tried to look at other types of things that are out there. One thing that's interesting, if you walk around this building and some of our others, are the whole concept of stand-up desks. I've got one of those stand-up desks. I haven't sat behind my desk in 2 months. I spend most of my day standing up when I'm in the office. So those types of things. And then when we realize the research there, we make those largely available to the other staff, secretarial staff, people who are maybe tied pretty closely to their desks, so that just being in tune to those types of things. I think that's it. At least I'm out of notes. So again, I would reinforce a lot of yellow there, but that's to be expected in October. This represents a lot of work, and I get to be the person who reports it, but really it's the work of not only the folks on this end of the table, but as well as our principals and folks in the school. And they take the strategic plan and they take the priority initiatives to heart, and understand that helps define the work that they're going to do. And I feel great this year that we're really focusing on helping buildings become a little bit more independent and helping teachers have some independence as well as when decision-making about how they teach.
Yeah, that's the best thing that I heard out of it all, is
Yep.
that each individual building can look and see what they need for their students and how their staff can figure out what they need. Because what works at one school is not the same as going to work at another school. The education's going to be the same, but, you know, it's.
Same thing
things are-
for teacher to teacher and classroom to classroom.
Yeah, I mean,
It's all
that's the best
different.
thing. I think that's such a, it's like we're releasing them from prison by saying, you can do what you do best, like you said at the opening address. And this is showing that you're really supporting them at this level, which is good to see.
The building plans I would characterize as being somewhat conservative this year. Part of that has to do with the time in which we put this into place. And part of it is they're testing to see, do they really mean this? Before we go too far down the road, are they really going to give us some autonomy? Are they really going to support us? So I think in subsequent years, you will see plans that are more and more aggressive and more focused on the flavor and the leadership of that building and where they want to go and how they can impact kids. So testing us this year, I would say, is probably fair. And when we live up to that, I think we'll see even more innovation.
You know, Stan, one of the most enduring themes that came out of our strategic planning 4 years ago, and I think it was Mr. Barton who, and I won't quote him, I won't attempt to quote him, but was just to get the hell out of the people's way. Let them self-determine to a certain degree, unshackle them, if you will. You know, if we're going to add something, we're going to leave something else. And I think that this plan's certainly reflective of that. That's the challenge I would issue to your staff as we go into the next phase of planning for the next strategic plan, is how can we do that more at the same time maintaining the standards that we have to, obviously, are obliged to maintain. How do we make it even more self-determined, more autonomy?
Absolutely.
We're tapping the creativity of our teachers.
Yep, teaching is an art and a science, and spend a lot of time on the science. It's time to spend some time on the art.
Any other items anyone needs to bring forth? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.